Welcome back to my channel for another Hasselblad episode, and this episode will be a lens review. And the lens I want to talk about in this video is the XCD 75P widest open aperture is an f3.4, and the P is not engraved here on the lens, but it has a meaning, and I'm going to explain this in the course of the video, of course. The plan for this video is as follows. First, I want to give you some specifications of the lens, some details, data points, and all of that. Second, we'll test a little bit the autofocus live in the studio and shoot Jennifer here in the background. And third, I want to show you real life images from a recent photo shooting with Stephanie, my photo model. And if you have not yet encountered Stephanie on my channel, then maybe you should watch my recent review about the Boya Magic microphone, which is the microphone I'm currently using and which solved really all my echo, reverb and sound problems here in this spacious studio. Let's kick this off. All right, so what do we have here? We have one of the usual Hasselblad XCD lenses. Let's get the lens width off for a moment and let's have a look into the lens. Minimalistic, like always. Widest open aperture is a 3.4, 75 millimeter. The filter thread is 72 millimeter, so not small, but also not super big. The lens is very compact and its weight is actually astonishingly low. 398 grams, and that's why this is in, let's say, the so-called P portfolio of Hasselblad XCD lenses. And P in the Hasselblad terminology is always coming after the focal length declaration if it is a more portable lens. So P stands for portable. The disadvantage to non-P lenses is that here the manual focus ring cannot be pulled up or down for manual focusing. And let me quickly show you this on the XCD 75V. Here you have a scale, and you also can then, if you want to manually focus, push this up here, and then you get the distance scale and can combine it with the aperture for some depth of field calculation. And that mechanism, which I find personally super ingenious by Hasselblad, is not on the portable lenses and also not, of course, on the 75P. And it's interesting that Hasselblad doesn't carve into the lens the P here. It just says XCD 75 in the same way as here XCD 55. And it's also not written in here. If you look here, it's a 3.4/75, but it is a more portable lens. And actually, if you think about 75 millimeter as a focal length and compare this with other brands, other lenses, this is actually a very compact tele lens for portraits, fashion, but also for landscape, of course, if you want to do that. Before I give you some of the data points and specifications of the lens, let's quickly talk about build quality. And this lens is like every other lens I have in the XCD lens portfolio, solid like a tank. The build quality is unbeatable. And given that the weight is only 398 grams, that's really a technical miracle in my opinion. So I like this lens a lot from a build quality perspective. It's also weather sealed. Let me show you quickly. Let's get this unmounted here. Let's put the camera in here. And then you see here the rubber sealing. So this is actually sealed against splash water and against dust. And in this way you can shoot under all weather conditions, which is very nice. Let me show you something else actually. Let me get the 55V and mount it, and let me give you some other interesting data point I really like. The V lens is here, and I mentioned this in one of my first videos when this system was brought to market. Always has play between the lens and the lens mount. Look at this. You even hear it. There is, like, I would call it wiggle. There is some play. That's not the case for the 75P. I'm going to show you because I think this interests a lot of people, because the discussion in online blogs and so on was pretty hot on display between the lens and the lens mount on the camera body. Listen to that. It's very solid how it snaps in. And here, no play. You hear no noise. This is sitting solid like a rock on the camera body and is almost melting into the lens mount. I really like it. So build quality, clearly 10 out of 10 points. Absolutely fantastic. Let's now talk about data points. First of all, the field of view you can expect from this camera lens combination is about the same as a 59 millimeter focal length on a 36x24 full frame sensor. And that comes from a crop factor of 0.79 and the widest open aperture on a full frame sensor, if you want to have equivalent depth of field, is about 2.7. Then we have here all in 10 elements in 10 groups. We have one aspheric element and 3 extra low dispersion elements. And that is all for me an optical miracle. I think this lens, given its size, its long focal length is a tele lens, 75mm, and its low weight of just below 400 gram is really astonishing. I think the Hasselblad engineers here really delivered a fine piece of optics, which is very portable. That's why it's called the 75P, as I mentioned before. We have here a minimum focusing distance of 0.55 meter. That's why Jennifer is not too far away, and I can show you in a moment how the autofocus is actually in terms of responsiveness. And we have here all in, if we look at this and switch it on, we have an aperture range here typically from let's focus quickly, from, let's get this here, wider open. So we see the widest open aperture. So f3.4 is the widest open aperture. And then we can stop this down, and that's Hasselblad typical all the way to f32. So that's all quite nice. I think in terms of data points, a really interesting lens. You can also kind of use it for close-up shots. The maximum magnification on this lens is 1 divided by 5.8. So still lower than 20%. But not too bad. And I'm going to try this out in a moment, what we can do in terms of magnification. Now you see here, I've currently here face detection activated and autofocus, and it immediately jumps to Jennifer's face. And it's also pretty responsive. Something here in this lens is working quicker when it comes to autofocus in combination with that camera than other XCD lenses I have shot. And by the way, let's open the aperture, widest open to f3.4. You see, very responsive. It gets sticky on Jennifer's face here. There is still no continuous autofocus here on this camera. So you would not be able to track in three-dimensional space Jennifer, but the face detection in this firmware here works pretty well. And I can take a shot here. Let's go into play mode. Let's double tap, and you see when the image is updated, is fully loaded. Wow, beautiful. But you get real images later from my photo model Stephanie, don't worry. So that's not the point I wanted to make. But the combination of the X2D with the XCD 75P creates actually an autofocus system all in. It's always the lens and the camera body who work together for good autofocus. That is quite responsive and gets the job done. Look at that. In terms of magnification, here I'm still in focusing range. Let's check how close I can go to Jennifer. Face will be detected anyway, but here it can no longer focus. You see, then I'm too close. So as I said before, the minimum focusing distance is 0.55 meter. Here I can still focus. Here I can focus. Here I can't focus any longer. So that's the maximum magnification you get, and that's how it looks like. I think it's time for sample images, and I will of course comment on them, and we'll discuss image quality and everything that's relevant for real life shooting with that beautiful 75p on the X2D. Okay, so I flagged a few of these images here where I want to provide some comments on, and let's start with this one here. To give you a little bit of background, what we did first were shooting in the studio, and we did shoot against a black background, and Stephanie was wearing something that we could make almost a little bit glowing against this black background. And I was also using a smoke generator, which is something I like from time to time because it makes these images more interesting. And this shot here is widest open f3.5. Well, I probably moved the aperture a little bit, and it should have been f3.4, but that will not move the needle. Inside, I was shooting with an ISO of 400, which is a piece of cake to handle for the Hasselblad X2D. And you see the lens is recognized. By the way, in Lightroom, also the optical profiles for corrections are fully recognized. So you can use distortion correction and everything will be handled automatically by Lightroom. Very convenient. And if I crop in here by 100%, you see how sharp, crisp, and nice this image is. And what always fascinates me is the Hasselblad natural color solution. There is probably not any single camera in the world who delivers this type of color grading here. And it looks good here inside the smoke, of course, and everything here is sharp. The contrast is nice. The micro contrast is nice. You see one hair here over her face, which is so nicely accentuated. And I think that's something I always observe with Hasselblad XCD lenses for the X system and the V system. No matter what lens you pick, you can always shoot them widest open. When the focus is sitting where it's supposed to sit, then the images will be pinpoint sharp and overall have just the perfect contrast and color grading which comes across if you look at these images. Quite nice. I want to show you another one here from these, and that's this one here. I like this image a lot. You know, the way how the smoke evolves is of course at random. It's by chance, right? But this almost looks like wings. Here's one wing and here is one wing. And I think it's a very nice representation of Stephanie, where her red shirt is glowing against this dark background here. And again, cropping in by 100%. Look at the face, the skin tone, the eyes, the eyelashes, the eyebrows. Now it's actually updated and you see it in full clarity. These images have almost 102 megapixels, so Lightroom always thinks a moment before the scene is updating when you crop in. But very nice representation of her face, very natural. That's her skin tone actually, her skin color. And then these wings made out of smoke around her. That's just a fabulous image. And I will give them to Stephanie, of course, when she's back from holidays, and she can use them on her social media accounts. Another one, I'm not sure I need to crop in here. It will give you the same results. Look at that. Perfect. And let's continue. Here is a shot from outside I wanted to show. So here was a car parking. It's actually, if you look here, it's a Porsche. And she was leaning on that car. The owner didn't catch us. And look at that outside. How natural is this? And what I also like in particular, and that's of course also partially driven by a medium format sensor here, is the transition from blurry to sharp and back to blurry areas. Look at this plant here in front of her, which is very blurry. It also gives here a green glow on her skin. And look at the transition, how this is evolving from blurry, fuzzy, not sharp, to sharp areas of the images, and then back into a very soft, smooth background here. Very nice. And of course, the advantage of a 44 times 33 millimeter sensor is fully played out here in these type of images. But very nice. I really like a lot how this lens and camera deliver the footage to me when I later look into it in Lightroom. Here another image, quickly looking here, is very sharp, nice. Look at that. The texture from her shirt, everything is there. The colors are nice, contrast nice, micro contrast nice. Another one here. That one I like because she looks a little bit from the side here. And look how this comes across. I mean, whatever photo model you're working with, whoever it will be, they will be totally excited about the footage you can create from that person. It's really, really cool. And I think I said it at the beginning, this lens is ideal. 75p is ideal for people photography, fashion, reportage maybe, you know, if you want to go into the tele area, compressed landscape, what have you. But with people and the way the skin tone, the skin color and the skin texture is rendered by this camera lens combination is absolutely mind-blowing in my opinion. I show you one more and then I stop. I think I made my points. Here she was leaning on a sculpture. Look at that, very natural. Still, she was looking friendly. She's not very often smiling into the camera. Typically, she's serious, but here she was smiling. And I think the whole scene is just very nicely rendered. And all in with this camera lens combination, you cannot go wrong. And you guys know that, right? I'm definitely not paid by Hasselblad or affiliated in any way. I ask them from time to time, almost begging them, please, if you bring a new camera or a lens, give it to me a couple of weeks before you announce it so I can test it. That unfortunately never happened. I will reach out to them again for the new version of the Hasselblad X2D because I think I can really deliver a nice introductory video on that if they would give it to me as a loan, and then I send it back, of course. I don't want to keep it without paying, but they never reach out. So I really have no reason to praise this camera lens combination. But I can tell you, if you look at that footage, and let's go back to my most favorite picture here. That's this one. And if you crop in by 100%, if you take everything together, the color, the sharpness, the contrast, the micro contrast, this is a dream combination for people photography, period. All right, that's it. That's all I wanted to say and show. I hope you liked that presentation. I can fully recommend the XCD 75P. I think the images spoke for themselves. And if you want a compact, lightweight telelens on the Hasselblad X system or the Hasselblad V system, which is the 907X, and the CFV 100C, then this will become your best friend. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.